Good morning.
Yeah, how are you doing?
How's everyone?
How's everyone? Hello.
I'm good.
Don't
Yes.
sound right.
It's too soon. Okay, is everyone set up? With the COVID update for Queensland, we have 5 new cases of COVID-19 in Queensland in the last 24-hour period. None of them are community acquired. All 5 are returned travellers from Papua New Guinea, underlining just how real that concern and risk is about the situation in PNG. The Health Minister is in the Torres Strait today, overseeing plans to ensure that our vulnerable Torres Strait Islander communities are vaccinated and well protected from what is a risk that is very, very close to home for them. There are 36 active cases in hospital here in Queensland. We vaccinated, Queensland Health vaccinated 2,650 people in the last 24-hour period yesterday. That brings our total number of vaccinations to date to 120,458. We're here today for what is a really fantastic story, and the Palaszczuk government is very, very proud of what's going on here at Herston Quarter, transforming a part of our city, transforming an historic part of our city. The most of my involvement here has been at STARS, but that's now a fantastic new health facility treating Queensland patients, and the rest of this precinct is undergoing an amazing redevelopment. It's part of what is a construction boom going on here in Queensland, and we expect that to continue as we continue to see that positive economic data such as the jobs growth that we saw yesterday. And so we're going to need more and more skilled construction workers, and that means good jobs for Queenslanders. Today, the program that we've just seen is putting 70 young people through the first stage of a career in construction, helping them to get their Certificate 1 on a pathway to an apprenticeship and eventually a job in the construction industry. And look, it's just so wonderful to work with organisations like Australian Unity and Hutchinson's Builders, who have a real long-term commitment to our city and our state and to developing the skilled workers that we need, providing employment. There is also a very important component of this program focused on providing opportunities for young First Nations people, and that's something that, of course, we all support, as well as efforts to identify young women who want careers in construction and providing them with opportunities, pathways into the construction industry. The whole redevelopment here is a $1.1 billion project, and what's so great about it is how it is incorporating and repurposing our historic heritage buildings that mean so much to our state and to the history of healthcare in this location. The buildings we've seen were nurses' quarters. I understand some of them were originally built by Hutchinson's many decades ago and are now being redeveloped by them. So what a fantastic opportunity for young people to seek a job in the construction industry, to learn valuable skills, particularly on heritage redevelopment, which will continue to be really important for our city, and at the same time learn a bit more about the history of Brisbane and our town. I'll ask Grace and the spokesperson from Australian Unity and Hutchinson's to say a bit more about it, and then of course we're happy to take questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Premier, and it is great to be back on the Herston Quarter site, soon to be developed into a world-class health precinct. And these buildings are absolutely magnificent, and it is going to be wonderful to see them open to the public after many years being hidden away in this beautiful part of Brisbane, in my electorate. These buildings are being rejuvenated, they're being brought back to life, like the nurses' quarters and the old buildings we've been in, by young apprentices, as we've seen and met today. And it's wonderful to meet these apprentices as part of the Hutchinson Training School, where 70 of those are attending school in one of our historic buildings, and they will be getting the skills which are the pipeline to continuing skills required by industry, not only to work on our historic buildings right throughout Queensland, but on the beautiful buildings right here in the Herston Quarter. It was inspirational to meet these young people, particularly those in the Indigenous program of Hutchinson's, who are award-winning program of training first Australians in gaining apprenticeships and gaining work in the construction industry. And we saw a young high school student who's completed year 12 just last year, who is now in the apprenticeship program and hopefully will become a trained, skilled tradie for the future. So this is a fantastic part of Brisbane. The Herston Quarter, Queen's Wharf project, Howard Smith Wharves, Cross River Rail, the Eagle Street Pier redevelopment. These will transform Brisbane, let alone if we were to win the Olympic Games for 2032. It's an incredible transformation of Brisbane, and I can't wait for these buildings to be completed, to have a look at them and to open them up to the public to enjoy this world-class health precinct. And I can see many workers standing around, and can I congratulate them on the wonderful work that they're doing here. Hutchinson's, who built these back in 1937, I think it was, now taking the opportunity to redo them again. And welcome to Richard McLaughlin from Australian Unity, who is a project development officer of this site, and I invite Richard to say a few words.
Thank you, Minister Grace. And firstly, I'd like to welcome the Deputy Premier and Education Minister Grace to Herston Quarter this morning. I'd also like to welcome Jack Hutchinson from Hutchinson Builders and representatives of our partners Metro North Hospital and Health Service to the site. Australian Unity is delighted to be partnering with the Metro North Hospital and Health Service and a range of Queensland-based organisations in the delivery of the Herston Quarter redevelopment project. Herston Quarter redevelopment project is a transformative 10-year precinct redevelopment with an end value in excess of $1.1 billion. We're now about 4 years into about a 10-year program, and at the peak of construction to date, we've had in the vicinity of 350 workers on site on a daily basis. Late last year we completed STARS, the public health facility, and that's now operating and employing many hundreds of medical and allied health professionals. As you've seen this morning, we're also well advanced in the heritage redevelopment component of the Herston Quarter redevelopment project. At the moment, we've got in the vicinity of 200 workers on site on a daily basis, including those young people in the Hutchinson Builders training facility, which is producing wonderful outcomes for young Queenslanders. As Minister Grace mentioned, it's a wonderful story that some of these heritage buildings were originally constructed by Hutchinson Builders in the 1930s, and it's wonderful to have them back here, helping us to redevelop the buildings and to repurpose them and in some respect take them back to their original use. They were originally built to be nurses' accommodation, and from early next year they will be student accommodation, housing somewhere in the vicinity of 700 students. So, as I said, we're delighted to be working with Hutchinson Builders. We applaud the work that they're doing on site, and particularly in the training school program. And together with Australian Unity's efforts around Indigenous and local industry participation, this reflects really positively on our organisations, but also on the Herston Quarter redevelopment project. So thank you all for coming this morning, and I'll hand to Jack Hutchinson to say a few words.
Thanks, Richard. Hutchies are a proud Queensland company. This is our 109th year of operating here. And as was alluded to earlier, we did build this building in 1937. I think it was called the Lady Lamington North Tower, and it cost £31,000. So a bit different to the contract values today. Hutchies are really proud to have our Trade Start School here too. It's an award-winning training program. And we also have Mark Cucks from our Stardom Yaga program, which is our Indigenous employment program, who have placed 547 young Indigenous Australians into employment today. I'll be fairly brief. That's probably all I wanted to say, but we're delighted to work with Australian Unity and Metro North, and we're delighted to have the ministers here today too. So thanks very much, and I think I'll hand back over to Richard, and I think then we might have some questions. But thank you.
So the heritage component of the Herston Quarter redevelopment project will be finished later this year and open to the public early in 2022. That's when we'll welcome students into the student accommodation facility. And we'll have our Heritage Town Square that we're standing in now open for the public and the community in the surrounding areas. And we expect that we'll have some cafes and other services for the local community at that point in time. The student accommodation facility will be open to any type of tertiary student. Obviously, we're sitting adjacent to the University of Queensland's medical and oral health campus immediately across the road, and the Queensland University of Technology is not far away in Kelvin Grove. There's also a significant number of students that interact with the Royal Brisbane Women's Hospital campus on a daily basis.
Thank you, Richard.
I don't have that level of detail, but I'm sure the Health Minister's Office can provide that to you. But you know, there are islands in the Torres Strait where you can see PNG from their beaches, and where it is very common for people to travel for traditional trade purposes between PNG and Torres Strait islands like Saibai Island. And so it's incredibly important that we get as many of those folk who we know are vulnerable vaccinated as quickly as we can, as well as the efforts that are underway to provide vaccines into PNG, as well as our efforts to provide healthcare to those who are who contract COVID in PNG, and I've got a bit of detail about that for you as well, if you like. The total number of active cases in hospital that are from PNG or travelled via PNG is 12. The total number of cases that we've had here from PNG now is 97. And we've also conducted, just in 2021, 8 medivacs of people from PNG who've contracted COVID-19 and been so sick that we need to care for them in our hospitals. What's important here is that we look to and we take the health advice. The health advice is that when you balance the risk of COVID against the risks of the vaccine, that in the case of AstraZeneca, those who are over 50 should continue to get those vaccines. Those who are under that vaccine, those who are under 50 should consult with their doctor about their particular risks. Well, I certainly welcome greater coordination and collaboration and communication between the Commonwealth and the states and territories. I think what we've seen throughout is that it is the state health systems that are very, very good at service delivery, and so the more we can engage their knowledge and their expertise in the rollout of the vaccine, which is incredibly important to our ability to return to a new post-pandemic normal. The vaccine program is incredibly important, so important that we should all be working together to get it right.
Some within the government, though, have said it's a bit suspicious that some markets call it twice a week rather than once a week, once a fortnight. What do you make of that? Do you think it's trying to spread the responsibility of the rollout onto the premises?
Look, I think it represents the scale of what's at stake here. For a long time I'd been telling people I thought we'd be back to a relative normal by the end of this year, but now with the vaccine program no longer working to that target, those timeframes are now at risk. And so I think it just underlines how the Prime Minister needs the help and support of the state and territory leaders and our health systems to get this right.
There are a lot of GPs that just have AstraZeneca sitting and have got people over 50 and things still going. Would you consider maybe fast-tracking some of the other phases, like phase 2, just allowing other people to
Yeah, the phasing of this program is very important. We started with our healthcare workers and quarantine workers. Obviously, the sooner that we could get them vaccinated, the quicker we eliminated that risk of transmission in our hospital wards and in our quarantine accommodation. Then going to the most vulnerable and leaving those who are the least vulnerable to last. So that program continues to make sense. I guess I just urge those in those groups to listen to the health advice, which is if you're over 50, you should get whichever vaccine is offered to you because the risks of COVID are greater than the risks of complications in that age group.
As the new local government minister, do you think it was appropriate for the state to sack all the Logan City councillors now that their fraud charges have been dropped?
Oh, look, I think given the set of circumstances that we were faced with, that was an appropriate course of action. You know, we have a range of institutions here that operate independently but need to react to the actions of each other, and that's precisely what happened here. The CCC did an investigation, the police made a range of decisions, the DPP have now made a decision also, but that doesn't change the way the government rightly reacted to decisions made by independent institutions some time ago.
But the legislation enabled this situation to happen. Does the legislation need to be reviewed?
Well, all the legislation did was put in place what operates in just about any other workplace. In just about any workplace, if you are charged with a serious offence, it is very normal for you to be suspended, for you to be stood aside. And that is all this legislation did. It's what applies to just about every Queenslander in their work. If they are charged with an offence, they are normally suspended until the outcome of that process.
There needs to be a mechanism or a step in legislation before there's that
Look, I don't think it's unusual for people in public roles, any public servant, for example, who was charged with a serious offence. It would be very normal for them to be stood aside. In fact, you would normally be calling upon us to do that. Look, I'll never regret taking 4 working days off to spend with my young family, my kids. They make great sacrifices to allow me to do this job, and I think taking a few days off to spend with them is entirely appropriate. If you think back to what we were saying at the start of last year when these lockdowns first started to come into place, we urged people not to cancel their bookings with tourism operators. We urged them to leave their deposits, their bookings there and delay them so that those funds could continue to be available to tourism providers, to accommodation providers. That's what we did. That accommodation was booked 2 years ago for a holiday we intended to take a year ago. We left the deposit with them and then booked it when we could. Look, I don't get what it is with the LNP's obsession with me at the moment. You know, they've called, I think, 3 press conferences just in the last week or so with no purpose other than to criticise me or call me names. As I say, I took a few days off to spend with my kids and I'm not going to apologise for that. Oh, look, I think most people I spoke to in Byron Bay think that Byron Bay should be part of Queensland. I agree with them. You would have heard me say that when we had discussions about the Queensland-New South Wales border. We offered at that time to move the border south of Byron Bay. We would have happily done that. I think most of you know that I camped at the Sunshine Coast at Christmas, came back to deal with the lockdown that occurred then. So I don't think anyone can question my commitment to Queensland or my love of Queensland beaches. I just took a few days to teach my 6-year-old how to stand up on a surfboard, which she did, and my 10-year-old how to boogie board. He loved it. Well, similarly, under your own figures, there's more than 3 million pages that were released under that RTI Act. And there are a range of very important reasons why some documents can't be released. I can say, as someone who is subject to very regular applications for right to information, that those independent officers work independently and always err on the side of releasing information where they can. They're important laws, and that transparency is important. But if you think about scenarios where people's private information is in those documents, scenarios where companies might have commercial in confidence information in those documents, where you can see there are clear reasons why sometimes they can't be released. If you think about Queensland Health, which holds a massive number of documents and is the subject to, I think, the largest number of right to information requests, many of those documents include people's private health information, and so it's entirely appropriate that they have a chance to object to the release of those documents and for that objection to be taken into account by independent public servants. Well, I understand the Heritage Minister is looking at that and the operations of the Heritage Council now, and I certainly welcome that. As a former Heritage Minister, I know how important it is that we maintain that history of our city, the fabric of our city. But what you can see here, I think, is the best way to do that. We can't lock those buildings away. It's uneconomic. It's not possible. In order to get the resources to maintain them, to redevelop them, we need to repurpose them. We need to find economic uses for them, and that's precisely what's happening here. We also need a skilled workforce that is able to do that work, and again, there will be people who are trained here that will be able to go out and provide those services. I know when I was Heritage Minister, I spent a lot of time with people who owned heritage buildings, and they do us a service by maintaining those buildings, often at great cost to themselves. And I think, if anything, finding ways to help them and support them to do that is really important.
The Premier won't be referred to the Ethics Committee over the email saga. Do you think she still is the case to answer those given Curtis Pitt found her emails could be considered used for official business?
Look, all I think that's happened here is the same as we've been saying for a long time. All of these communications have been through very detailed processes, and this is just another one. And this process again confirmed that the process has been appropriate and that the decisions that have been made by various independent officers is appropriate.
What have you asked the Department to investigate in relation to the demolition of the house?
I'm not aware of an ongoing investigation, but I'm happy to look into it.
Just on the Byron Street, what was the reaction when you saw those photos of the company?
Look, I'll let others make those kind of comments. I've reflected on what I think the LNP's motivations are. I don't want to say too much more about it.
You're talking about the LNP's motivations. They must see you as a threat. Do you have legitimate aspirations?
Well, you'd have to put David Crisafulli's motivations to him. I think it's quite extraordinary that they continue to call press conferences with no purpose other than to criticise me, especially when, this is a bloke who said he'd be different. At the moment, he just looks like a less effective version of Campbell Newman. Look, I'm very, very happy being Deputy Premier. I think you can tell that.
And do you still have confidence in Alan exploring?
Look, the CCC has an incredibly important role, and I don't think it's appropriate for people in roles like mine, where the CCC have an important role to oversight my work and the work of my agency. I don't think it's appropriate to be making those kind of comments. Sure.
Question for me. Okay. Lucky me. Yes, Lydia.
No, it's not very exciting. Do you have an update on the consent review that the Department's doing?
I'm sorry.
Do you have an update on the review last Department's doing about consent review?
Yes, look, it's proceeding very well, and we are working about, what we need to do in the curriculum space. We're also working with the federal government, who I know have also developed some materials. We have an Education Council meeting at the end of the month on the 30th of April, where all the ministers and territories will get together with the federal government. We will see what comes out of that, but the one meeting that I'm really looking forward to is my Ministerial Student Advisory Council, where I'll have written to them. I've written to their parents, and I've written to the principals of their schools to say that I will be asking a series of questions about respectful relationship training and consent and reporting laws, and I'm really looking forward to their feedback and some of the questions that I'll be asking them. So I'm really looking forward to that meeting. I think it's in the second week of May. So we are really ploughing along with looking at the curriculum and looking at the best age-appropriate way that we introduce respectful relationship, consent and reporting curriculum into our schools.
Very good. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.